Go ahead, ladies.
Thank you for joining us today. My name is Biliana Yakuda, and I am one of the program managers for the Therapy Animal Program at Pet Partners. I will be one of your hosts for the day.
And I'm Lisa Ziner, Evaluator Instructor Support Specialist for the Therapy Animal Program. I've been a handler for 10 years with a dog and 4 years with a rabbit. In addition, I am a licensed evaluator and instructor. Today, we will discuss considerations for becoming a Pet Partners volunteer when you are a minor between the ages of 10 and 18. Parallel to the discussion about the minor registration experience, we will also address what a parent or guardian will need to keep in mind about our processes. For the sake of brevity, we will use the term parent for the rest of this webinar to refer to both parents and guardians of a minor. Since many among our current audience and the future audience of the recording of this session are likely to be families new to this process, we'll start off with some basic concepts related to therapy animal work. We will next cover the steps and responsibilities for both the minor and their parent during the Pet Partner registration process. Last, during the webinar, we will address selecting and conducting visits as a minor. At the end of this session, we'll allow plenty of time for questions and answers. Feel free to submit questions as they come to mind, and those will be answered after our main presentation wraps up.
While Pet Partners has more than 13,000 active teams, only a bit over 150 of those handlers are minors. There are many reasons why we hope more young people will consider joining our program. Pet Partners teams visit clients of all walks of life, a variety of backgrounds, ages, etc. Every client will be able to connect differently with different handlers. At the same time, each handler will have a slightly different approach to their visits based on their personality, life experiences, sense of humor, and similar attributes. As a result, Pet Partners recognizes that a youth handler may very well have the unique ability to relate to a subset of clients in a way that adults would never quite be able to. An additional reason why we are particularly excited when young people register with us is the influx of fresh perspectives and new ways of viewing our program and processes that youth handlers bring. Pet Partners greatly respects and appreciates the experience and wisdom that comes with age. At the same time, we're energized to support youth handlers and their enthusiasm for therapy animal work. For a minor Pet Partners volunteer, being a registered team can bring useful skills for personal and professional growth. The Pet Partners volunteer experience can greatly enhance every handler's knowledge and skill with respect to being a responsible pet parent. Our program places great emphasis on advocating for your animal, being very mindful of your animal's consent for participating in activities, and reading their body language. These are all concepts universally applicable to any human who owns or is otherwise responsible for the welfare of a pet. The knowledge and perspective a minor will gain through participation in our therapy animal program will remain helpful to them into the future with all animal interactions they have. At the same time, youth handlers will gain experience as a volunteer and a member of an organization known for high standards of professionalism. Such experience is often highly regarded when a young person applies to college, the workforce, or progressively more responsible volunteer positions. Aside from the many wonderful benefits of becoming a handler for Pet Partners, it is important that minors consider the corresponding responsibilities. Participation in our therapy animal program requires the handler to take a class, remain up to date on policies and procedures, pass an evaluation with their animal, proactively connect with facilities, appropriately respond if involved in or witnessing an incident, among many other functions. As such, this is a more involved path to volunteerism than other options which may be available to a young person. For this process to result in a highly satisfactory volunteer experience, it is important to approach it with the right expectations and motivation. Our experience is that when the youth handler is enthusiastic and willing to put in the hard work, they are some of the best handlers we have seen. If a young person starts this process only because this is the volunteerism they were assigned by a school or a parent, and not because they have passion for this work, the end result is a team who doesn't usually make it through the full registration process and never ends up volunteering with us. Our hope is that this webinar will help families decide if this type of volunteerism is right for their child and to set up every minor for success.
Let's introduce some terms. Let's start off with some basics. In our field of work, the term used for animals who register with us is therapy animal. It's important to keep terminology clear and consistent. Therapy animals are not the same as service or emotional support animals. Pet partners, handlers do find themselves in a position to provide clarification about the different terms when on a visit. So be sure to visit the terminology page on our website to learn more. You have already heard us use the term team. What we mean by a team is the human, adult or minor, and the animal with whom they register. If the person, say Mary, registers with two separate animals, Max and Bella, this would result in two separate teams. Mary and Max will be one team, and Mary and Bella will be counted as a separate team. Registration is the final outcome of going through the Pet Partners process. When a team becomes registered, it means they have completed all the necessary steps to join our organization as a volunteer and are authorized to conduct visits as a Pet Partners team. Please note, we do not certify teams. Another term we have already referred to is visit. A visit is the time a team spends with people while in their official capacity of a representative of Pet Partners. You will see Pet Partners materials refer to while on a visit. What we typically mean by that is that, of course, as a pet owner, you get to decide where you go with your pet, what collar or leash you have on them, and what activities you participate in, etc. But if you are on a Pet Partners visit, you are representing our organization, so there will be specific sets of expectations you will need to be mindful of. Facility is the place where a team volunteers. The most common facilities visited by Pet Partners teams are hospitals, nursing homes, schools, and libraries. As long as they are following our policies, teams are welcome to choose the specific facility where they will volunteer. Lastly, the term client will be used to refer to the individuals at those facilities with whom Pet Partners teams interact. The clients may be students at a school, patients at a hospital, employees at a company holding workplace wellness events, and so on.
What do we mean by handling, and who is the handler? The human who registers with the animal is the animal's handler. This is the individual, adult or minor, who must take the handler course, which we describe later in this presentation. This is the person who attends an evaluation with the animal. The handler is the person who handles the animal on a visit. Only the handler holds the animal's leash. Only the handler, rather than their parent if the handler is a minor, gives commands to the animal while on a visit. The handler cleans up of their animal, looks out for the animal's stress signals, ensures the animal's well-being while on visits. A volunteer, 10 through 15 years old, while they will have an accompanying parent or other assigned adult on every visit. While it is very likely that the animal will be highly familiar with the accompanying adult, only the registered handler is permitted to actually handle the animal while representing Pet Partners at a facility. So let's look at a few more examples of handler responsibilities. The handler is the one advocating for their animal and educating each client they encounter about how to interact with that animal. The handler will tell the client about what the animal likes and dislikes, where they want to be petted the most, why not to touch other places. What if it is a reading event, for example? The minor handler's responsibility is to focus on the rabbit with whom they're conducting the event. Does the rabbit still want to be at the event? Has the rabbit started to fidget and dig? The handler should be monitoring this the entire time and should be ready to step in and take a break or leave the setting if the animal needs it. Being a handler is about multitasking and being your animal's best advocate.
Now that we have discussed some basic terms, let's talk about the age requirements for participation in our program. If you are between the ages of 10 through 17, you are considered to be a minor handler. This does not affect your status as a team in the eyes of Pet Partners. All of our teams are vital and equal, regardless of animal or species registered or age of the handler. But we will need parent or guardian sign-off at each step of the process. For volunteers 10 through 15 years old, a parent needs to give written consent for the handler to register. The parent needs to also be present at the evaluation event and accompany the handler during every visit. For volunteers who are 16 or 17 years old, the parent must give written consent for you to register with our program. We would like to strongly recommend that the parent of a minor handler stay current on all communication from Pet Partners, which is sent to prospective and current teams. Embedded in newsletters may be policy updates, which can affect how a team visits. If a minor has been involved in or was witness to an incident, understanding the investigation process as it unfolds will be of particular importance to the parent. As we go through this process, we will need separate emails for the parent and minor so we have a clear way to track permission for participation and are able to contact each individual separately if necessary.
One of the questions we frequently answer is about training. Pet Partners does not require animals to go through specific training. We do expect the animals who register with our program to have basic obedience skills already in place by the time they attend an evaluation. Some prospective volunteers choose to teach those basic obedience skills at home. Others choose to work with a trainer. Whichever way you approach basic obedience, it is important that the handler is knowledgeable about and comfortable with giving appropriate commands to their animal. At the same time, the animal must be perfectly comfortable responding to commands given by the minor handler. Here is a scenario we would like to caution you against. Say Dad, Bill, took the family's dog, Rufus, to obedience class and made sure Rufus learned basic commands very well. In the meantime, Bill's 10-year-old son, Jimmy, was a play buddy with Rufus, and the family didn't consistently practice Jimmy giving commands to Rufus since commands were always Mom and Dad's domain. Now Jimmy wants to register to volunteer with Rufus. Rufus knows commands. Jimmy knows the names of the commands, except that when they're at the evaluation, it becomes clear that Rufus doesn't think of Jimmy as someone who gives commands. That's my play buddy, after all, the human puppy of the house. As a result, Rufus just wants to play with Jimmy instead of perform the commands he is familiar with. The lesson from such a scenario is to think ahead and make sure that the minor in the household is involved in every step of the training, has practiced successfully giving basic commands, and reads body language very well. Once on a visit, Jimmy will be expected to be fully responsible for Rufus, so Mom and Dad should practice that well in advance.
The registration process. Now that we have reviewed the terminology and age requirements, let's discuss the process of becoming registered with Pet Partners. Registration steps are completed online. The first step is for the handler to create an account on our website and start a registration. Upon providing their date of birth, a youth handler will be prompted to provide the contact information for their parent. Pet Partners will send an email to the parent requesting written consent for the youth to register with our program. The next step is to take the handler course. This class is for humans only and focus on what it's like to be a therapy animal team and a variety of policies and procedures of the organization. The class is available either in person or online. The parent may attend the workshop along with their child or may be alongside the child as they take the online class. Especially with a younger minor, such as a 10-year-old, it's particularly important for a parent to be familiar with the expectations being placed on their child and the responsibilities all handlers who are part of our program have. Please note that if the parent also plans to register with Pet Partners, they would need to separately take the handler course as part of their own registration process, even if they have been alongside the minor during the minor's registration. Once the coursework is complete, the handler will take an online assessment and receive a course completion certificate. At that point, they are eligible to attend a team evaluation. The key step before being accepted to the Pet Partners Therapy Animal Program is the team evaluation. A team evaluation is conducted by trained and licensed Pet Partners team evaluators. The evaluation events can be found on the Pet Partners calendar, the same place to look for and sign up for an in-person workshop. Who attends an evaluation and how does this work? An evaluation consists of the team working through a series of 21 exercises where we evaluate both the skills of the team, with exercises such as sit down and stay, and the team's aptitude for this type of volunteering, where we observe the team interacting with angry people, crowds, and sometimes clumsy petting. There are species-specific evaluation overview documents available in the resource library of the Pet Partners website. To learn more about the exercises a team would be expected to perform, type evaluation overview in the search box in the resource library. Evaluations are usually scheduled for a weekend and last approximately 30 to 45 minutes. During the evaluation, the minor and their animal will be the ones performing the exercises. However, the parent must be present at the evaluation appointment as well. At the start of your appointment, the parent will have to make a tough choice, whether to remain in the room as the exercises are being performed. The answer is up to each family. Will you being in the room distract either the child, animal, or both? Depending on how big of a distraction that may be, the team's performance may be significantly impacted and possibly cause them to not receive a passing score. Or maybe a 10-year-old prospective handler will feel encouraged and supported by having their parent in the room and relax into performing better. Make this decision with your family dynamics in mind. We know for some it may be hard to sit outside and wait, but if it gets the results we all hope for in the end, not being in the room for 30 to 45 minutes isn't really so hard. At the end of the evaluation, the evaluator will review the results with both you and the minor, both the minor and parent, and both will sign the score sheets. Thus, even if a parent elected to be out of the room as the evaluation takes place, you will have the opportunity to hear the evaluator's feedback and ask any further questions you may have.
Once you have passed an evaluation, the score sheets from that event must be uploaded to the registration which the minor has started on our website. A few additional steps will also need to be completed. Every team must submit a photo of the human and animal together, which will then be used to issue the team a badge. Handlers have the option to have their name listed as only first name or first and last. As the parent of a minor, you may wish to weigh in on that decision as it may have privacy implications. The additional steps to complete include submitting a completed health screening form, selecting whether the team would like to participate in special initiatives such as Read With Me and Walk With Me, and upon final approval of the materials, submitting registration payment. When the process is completed, the team will receive via email an acceptance letter and may begin visiting.
Finding facilities to accept minor handlers. You've become registered. Congratulations. Now it's time to figure out where you will visit. We actually recommend you do some research on this step before you even start the registration process. While the information you learn throughout the registration process is useful, even if you never become a therapy animal handler, it still would be disappointing to go through the entire process only to have nowhere to visit. So, before you start this process, you may wish to think about where you would like to visit and why, and then see if that is even a possibility. Pet Partners does not assign or otherwise match volunteers with facilities where they can visit. We do have a listing of facilities actively seeking teams, which is available to currently registered teams. Plus, handlers are welcome to directly approach facilities where they are interested in volunteering. For much more information on finding and selecting visits, we recommend you watch our webinar recording of Finding Visits series in the resource library of the Volunteer Center. Being a Pet Partners handler is a very responsible volunteer position where you are not only in charge of yourself, but you are also responsible for an animal. As a result, facilities will take your age and experience into consideration. The good news is many facilities are open to minor handlers, but not every single environment is prepared to welcome youth. If you are only interested in volunteering at one or two local facilities and are not willing to look beyond those locations, we strongly encourage you to check with the volunteer coordinators at those facilities and find out if they accept minor handlers. It would be a good idea to do so even before you begin the registration process. When a facility posts a volunteer opportunity through our website, we do ask if the opportunity is open to minor handlers. This offers an additional filter for your team to use when browsing volunteer opportunity listings. If a facility does accept minor volunteers, go ahead and inquire about additional details. There may be additional steps that a minor handler might have to go through before they can start volunteering. Frequently, the extra step would simply be another form to obtain parental permission. But there may be also additional training or other steps individual facilities have. It's also a good idea to find out how flexible their volunteer schedule is. Since a 14-year-old handler, for example, would need to have a parent present during the visits, the parent schedule would need to be a good match for the volunteer openings that the facility has.
Once a handler has identified a facility where they would like to volunteer, the handler works out the details directly with the facility and schedules actual visits. On the day of the visits, the handler arrives with their animal on facility grounds, checks in with the volunteer coordinator or staff per previously determined procedure. The team then visits with clients. How is this done? It depends. Sometimes clients will be present in a common area such as a lobby. Sometimes the team will be expected to visit clients room to room. Each team needs to clarify prior to the start of visits what the facility expects the visit to look like. During the course of visits, a handler interacts with clients, instructs them on how to approach their animal, and looks out for the animal's comfort. It is essential that throughout every visit, both the animal and client are genuinely interested in the visit taking place and are actively consenting to the interaction. We encourage all prospective handlers to watch the webinar recording on consent available in our resource library. Once the visit has wrapped up, the team heads home. An optional but certainly encouraged follow-up activity is to log your visits on the Pet Partners website.
The previous slide described what a typical visit looks like. Take a moment and consider, is this what you were envisioning? Is the level of responsibility a handler has in line for what you are envisioning for yourself as a young handler or for your child? For handlers who are 16 and 17 years old, the full responsibility for all aspects of the visit and policy compliance is based upon the individual, as it is with an adult. For handlers who are 10 through 15 years old, some responsibility to ensure compliance is shared with the parent. Let's look at that a little more in detail. If 10-year-old Jimmy is registered with Rufus, Jimmy will be expected to handle Rufus, focus on following policies, such as always holding the leash, interact with clients politely, and ask questions if uncertain. If the minor and parent are both registered with the same animal, it is permissible but strongly discouraged that both parent and minor will handle the animal during the visit. Pup Max has a unique, potentially slightly different relationship with Mom than he does with child Ethan. If during a visit, Mom and Ethan hand off the leash to each other and switch between who is handling Max, this could create confusion and a less than ideal visit experience for Max.
For handlers ages 10 through 15, a parent or a specifically assigned adult, such as an uncle or a grandparent, must accompany the handler on all visits. What are the parent's responsibilities? As a first step, the adult will ensure the minor handler arrives on time for all scheduled visits. Once you're among clients, your focus will be on the child and their interaction with the clients or staff. Did the client ask a question that 10-year-old Ethan doesn't quite understand? Mom can help by providing some brief clarification to Ethan or by requesting that the client paraphrase their question. Depending on where you are visiting, the client may have some cognitive impairments, such as in the case of an individual suffering from dementia. In such a situation, Mom might want to pay extra close attention in case the client becomes unpredictable in their speech or behavior. This may be a difficult situation for young Ethan to handle on his own. Consider another scenario. Ethan is registered with pup Mimi. Mimi is allergic to some dog treats. A client starts offering Mimi a treat. Uh-oh, this could be a problem. Young Ethan tries to speak up and warn the client that Mimi has allergies and shouldn't be given treats. But setting such assertive boundaries, especially in the short time it takes for Mimi to eat up the potentially dangerous treat that is about to be offered, can be challenging for 10-year-old Ethan. Mom needs to be vigilant enough to step in and, if necessary, block the hand of the treat from reaching Mimi and say to the client, as Ethan mentioned, it's bad for Mimi to have treats. Coordination with facility staff is also an area that a parent will likely assist in. Is there a schedule change conversation that needs to happen with the volunteer coordinator? Mom and Ethan would probably want to participate in that together.
While there are a number of policies and procedures a handler would be expected to follow when representing pet partners, we would like to highlight a few with which a parent may be most likely to have to assist. Infection prevention and following of facility contact precaution protocols is very important for a team who will visit in a healthcare setting. For example, if 12-year-old Maggie is visiting with a 4-pound Yorkie, Mitzi, Maggie will likely place Mitzi in the laps of clients. This should only be done with the use of a barrier between client and Mitzi's paws, such as a towel. A different barrier must be used with every client. Maggie's dad should keep an eye to make sure Maggie is following the barrier expectation. Let's consider another example. There is a sign on a patient's door which says contact precautions. But upon seeing Maggie and Mitzi, the patient happily invites them in by speaking up while in bed. What does contact precautions sign mean? This patient is either battling a potentially contagious condition or is at risk if they come in contact with germs volunteers might bring in. Young handler Maggie may not fully understand this. Her dad would help by making sure Maggie and Mitzi don't enter the room. Privacy and confidentiality are very important topics. While both clients and a facility are free to take and share whatever photos they wish, Mom may need to keep an eye to make sure 15-year-old handler Claire does not take and post on social media a photo of a client without having obtained written consent. A very common policy we discuss is the requirement that at all times during a visit, the handler will hold on to the leash of their animal and not hand it off to anyone else. What if the facility asks the handler to let go of the leash so the pup can more freely run around the courtyard and entertain the elderly residents with his antics? The minor handler will have to say no. Will the facility be willing to hear that no? Most of the time they will, but sometimes they might not. A parent's assistance would be certainly appropriate to let the facility know that it is against pet partners policy. And as with all facilities and handlers of any age, a facility is allowed to have policies and procedures which are more strict than those of pet partners. However, it is not acceptable for the facility policies to contradict those of pet partners and put a handler in a precarious situation. Depending on how young the handler is, for example, 11 years old, pet partners would rely on the parent to help ensure their child is adhering to pet partners policies. This may involve discussing with the facility any contradiction in expectations and drawing the line, including by potentially saying that volunteering at that facility is not the right fit due to a conflict in policies.
As you can already tell, there is a lot to keep in mind while on a visit. Woo! This is a note to the parents in the audience. Hard as it sometimes may be, it is important to allow the child to handle the situation until they ask for help. Part of the journey all handlers take is learning about themselves, their animals, and the clients they visit. We hope you will find that each moment in some ways is a teachable moment. Think of this scenario. There is a client that pup Molly loves, but your child does not necessarily care for and hopes to not visit on that unit. But your child won't say anything to anyone other than you. It may not be what a client said or did, but the child is uncomfortable. What do? Our advice is to guide them, but please, unless absolutely necessary, do not fix it for them. Encourage them to learn to correspond with pet partners or their facility. This way, the child has the tools should anything unusual or an incident happen down the road and they need to or just want to talk about it. Encouraging the minor to be the team captain, we hope will be a skill that keeps on giving throughout the minor's lifetime. Keep in mind this skill can only be developed if you are on the sidelines full of encouragement.
The vast majority of the time visits are perfectly pleasant and uneventful. Every once in a while, however, an incident, which is what we call any unusual occurrence, might take place. It could be something as simple as a person reporting to pet partners that the minor's registered dog, Molly, barked at another dog in the hallway. Or the situation might be reversed, and a minor may witness an incident such as seeing another handler hand off the leash of their dog to a client. What do you do? The first thing we advise in any situation, no matter how awkward it may feel, is to leave as soon as possible after an incident occurs, especially if your animal was the one involved in the incident. Emotions are going to run high, and an already stressed animal will not be in a position to have an effective and safe remainder of the visit. Next, we ask that the handler submit an incident report via our website. If the parent was accompanying the minor on a visit, we request that they submit a separate report as well. The Pet Partners Incident Review Team will connect with you and discuss next steps. The vast majority of the time, incidents are learning opportunities for both us as an organization as well as for the teams involved.
And with this, we have wrapped up our content for the day. We would like to now open the floor for questions or any input that you would like to share with us. We have covered a lot of information and realize questions may come up after the webinar wraps up. Please feel free to use the Contact Us form on our website to submit any additional questions that come up down the road. All right, and I see that we already have a question that has come up. I understand the handler and parent have the option to be in or outside the evaluation. However, knowing the parent will be present with the 10 to 15-year-old on visits, I think it would be beneficial to have the parent present during the evaluation to see how the animal reacts to both in the room. We might see the animal distracted by the parent's presence and not interacting with the minor. What are your thoughts about that? Lisa, would you like to address that in any detail?
Well, the only thing I can say is after evaluating a lot of family members, having other people in the room with the family is a big distraction. I usually counsel all of my families, and this is not just with minor handlers. It could be a husband and wife. It could be a mother-daughter, that you're in that situation and you're only focusing on the team. In a lot of cases, especially if you're looking at a minor handler, the dog may not totally understand at that point in time that it needs to be focusing only on the child. It may try to focus on the adult. While that may happen on a visit, it probably wouldn't cause an incident, and it would be very understandable to the client. But during an evaluation, the evaluator is going to have to evaluate by what they see. And if that child can't keep the dog's focus on them because mom or dad are in the room, or mom and dad are anxious and the dog doesn't know why mom and dad are anxious over in the corner and they're feeling all that stress, there are a lot more components that would actually be present during the visit. So like we said, no, there is no right answer to this, but we just want to make sure that it's discussed prior, because if the child does get a not ready and it's because of mom or dad insisting on being in the room and watching that process, it could be very disappointing. And depending on where we do evaluations, there may not be another evaluation, relatively quickly. So for the family dynamic, all we ask is that it's discussed and all things are considered. So if something does work against that team, they understand it, and then they don't take it out on you as the evaluator.
That's a great answer. Thank you for that. We have another question. Can a grandparent serve as the guardian or the same function as a parent? It is up to the family dynamics who is in a position of overseeing the actual visits for the purposes of obtaining actual consent, as in the written documented in our system consent, which is required for us to have before we can fully register a team. Then it has to be whoever is legally the guardian or the adult responsible for the child. So it would either have to be the parent or whoever person is legally assigned as their guardian. If their grandparent is the one who is legally assigned as their guardian, then absolutely. For the purposes of overseeing the actual visits, we realize that the person who is legally the guardian of the minor might not be available 100% of the time to go on visits with them. So they, for those purposes, may assign someone else that responsibility, but just for the consent, it has to be whoever is legally in that position. We have another question. I am already a registered team handler. I have a friend whose daughter would like to be a handler with her own dog. Do I have to be related to the minor to be her adult when visiting if she passes her evaluation? So if the parent chooses to assign someone whom they know very well the responsibility of being the overseeing adult. They can choose to. You would not be able to be the person who gives consent for the child's participation in the program, obviously. And if any question comes up, we would turn to the person who is the consenting person, and they would need to be well aware of who the assigned adult supervising the visits is on every single visit. So there needs to be very close communication.
All right. The next question is, what are recommended places to visit for a minor? We have to see how they do during the evaluation. Currently, I know that we have many minor handlers working in assisted living facilities. Some of our seniors do brighten their day by seeing both an animal and a smiling young child. Also, many of our children work within their own schools. So if they're going to a middle school, they may have mom or dad drop off the dog later in the day, and they may help somebody with tutoring, reading after school. Right now, those are two that come right off the top of my head. But again, it really depends on the skills that the minor handler and the animal show to the evaluator, and then the evaluator will guide you as to where they think those two will, what setting they'll be the most successful in. And of course, it's also going to come down to what the facility has as far as age limits. Setting your sights on a hospital is probably going to be a hard sell if you're a 10-year-old handler. Most hospitals are going to require you to be 18 or 21 years of age just for liability purposes. But there are, again, many places that would love to have a young person come in and brighten the days of their clients in memory care, assisted living, schools, and libraries.
Absolutely, and it's also a matter of the maturity of the minor as well. If it is a 10-year-old, there's very good chances they're not going to be volunteering in a hospice setting. But if it's someone who is a couple months away from turning 18 and they're wanting to visit, say, on a college campus, that would absolutely be a very easy kind of a match to make. So it's a matter of negotiation. There aren't hard and fast rules, but it needs to be a good fit for both the animal as well as for the handler. Next question is, can a prospective junior attend a visit to observe during the training before being evaluated? So observation depends on what the facility would say. We don't have any way to schedule and to guarantee that there will be an opportunity for a young person to observe a visit. But if they do know people in the community who are visiting and they have an established relationship and the handler is agreeable to having someone accompany them on a visit to watch how the visit proceeds, and the facility is agreeable to having someone without obviously handling the animal in any sort of way, but just on a certain visit accompany along, that would be acceptable. But it needs to be cleared obviously with the facility, not only with the handler who would be doing the handling during the visit. Next comment is, question is, if the overseer is a handler with another dog, can they take their dog on a visit along with the minor and their dog? I would say this is not a good idea to do. And the reason for that is if we have two animals on site, a human will be assigned to pay attention, very close attention to each of the animals. So if even if they're volunteering within the same room, if it's a group visit, and the guardian or overseer person is there with their own animal, and the minor is there with their own animal, if something were to happen, whom does the overseeing adult pay attention to and first respond to? Their own animal, the child that they're responsible for, who's now paying attention to the animal that the child is there with? It introduces too many variables. Is it possible sometimes to do in a really calm, very predictable setting where there isn't a lot of physical space between where the adult and the child are physically located within the room? It is possible. So it is not strictly against policy. However, there are so many reasons why this could turn complicated within seconds that we would strongly discourage that from being done. Actually, Lisa and I recently Worked on an incident where the minor was with an animal on site, and the supervising adult, who was a relative, was on site with their animal as well, and it didn't result in the best of outcomes for those two teams because of how the incident took place. So we discourage that as an option. We have a couple more minutes for questions to come in, and in the meantime, I wanted to encourage people to, as you guys close out of our webinar, once we wrap up for the day, to please take the survey that we have at the end of this webinar. It'll give us very useful information about what you liked best about today's presentation, and what types of topics you would like to hear down the road, be it in a presentation on the same topic, or what other presentations you would like seen down the road on different topics. This is very useful input for us, very useful feedback, and it takes only a couple minutes to complete the survey. We also do, as we mentioned, have a lot of other webinar offerings, both in terms of recordings that are available within the resource library of our volunteer center, available for anybody to watch and learn from, as well as upcoming webinars that are already posted and are being posted as we schedule them out on our website. It is a very good idea to educate yourselves as much as possible before deciding whether this is the right process for you. Would you recommend the online training or class for a junior? Lisa, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it really depends on how a child learns. Being in a class is nice because you have the instructor there. You can ask questions as they come up, but I know many young people today love being on the computer and it just works for them. They can set their own schedule. You know, mom and dad can definitely be there and see, but of course most of the instructors would also allow mom or dad or whoever the guardian is to audit a class. It really is on how people learn the best. I'm better in an in-person workshop, but I'm an old lady. All of my kids I know would prefer to take it online. So I think really the best way is to ask the child what they're more comfortable with. Regardless if they do the in-person or the online course, they still will both be required to do an online assessment. So there is no way to, if they're not that enamored with the computers, there is really no way to get away from it. At least they'll have to take the assessment through that process.
We have a question of, can a very mature minor go through the training process before age 10 and then test once they turn 10? So it's a matter of maturity, but it also can be a matter of just the development of the skills of learning and retaining information, since technically the training which we require is the handler course. It's a good idea to take that at as mature of an age as possible, and so not push it to a handler who is too young. That way we're ensuring that maximum learning is occurring and that some of the concepts that are potentially being introduced in the class are not going to be kind of over the head of a young handler, just in terms of language and concepts and how the information is presented. So it's not necessarily to the handler's advantage to push that sooner, because they may actually not understand and retain the information quite as well if they're younger than 10 years old. What can certainly be done before they turn 10 is that they can watch any and all of the webinar recordings that we have. You can certainly start going through the process of actually training basic obedience with the animal, and the handler practicing those skills, and the handler practicing giving those commands and the animal listening to them. You can certainly start training on body language and the handler recognizing, is this a sign of stress in the animal? Is this a sign of the animal enjoying themselves in that moment? So that's the type of training and practice that we would strongly recommend start before the age of 10. But don't it's not going to be in the child's best interest to push the pet partners training to an earlier time. Allow them to turn 10 and then go through the process of taking the class, especially if they choose to take the online class. That could literally be just 2.5, 3 hours on an afternoon. So it's not going to be something that necessarily holds them up once they have reached that age. All right, and with this, we have wrapped up our time for the day. Thank you so much for everyone who attended. If you know of young people or families who are interested in this process, feel free to let them know that such a webinar recording exists. It is available for viewing. It will be available for viewing within about a week following this presentation. The recording will be processed for just the technical aspect of it and placed in our resource library. We're always happy to answer any questions that come up down the road. And thank you for being here today. We look forward to receiving your post-webinar survey feedback as we wrap up today's session. Have a wonderful rest of your day.